As you all know, when we had, for those of you who were in prayer meeting yesterday, one of the things when she was ministering and she told everybody to get their oil, and those who didn't have oil would get water. And I didn't want to water where I was because I was not at home. And I was saying, I have to find some oil, but it's not a place that you would normally find the oil. And I sat there and I went looking all around to see if I would find oil, and I didn't find any. And as I sat back down and I looked up, there was a bottle of olive oil in a most unlikely place. A bottle of olive oil on a shelf. What it's doing there, I don't know, but God provided, just as he provided the lamb for Abraham, and just as he provided the lamb of God for us. He provided oil for me yesterday, so I was able to anoint myself, and I thank God for that. Seems simple. It seems simple, but God works in some simplistic ways that he says, listen, he's saying to you, I am God. That's what he said to me yesterday. And so I thank God. And we want to continue where we left off. It's been a while since we were, on this journey, asking ourselves the question, who am I? Who am I? And we're asking each other, who are you? Who are you? And I'm not going to go back, if you were not here, and if you missed any session, you can check YouTube and see where we have reached. But we're looking at who God is, because we have said, and our mantra for this year is, the people that know their God will be strong and do exploits. The people that know their God. And we are looking at who we are. And it's important to know who we are in relation to who God is, because we were made like God. So if we understand who we are, then we'll understand who God is. Excuse me. And if we look at God and understand who God is, then we will know who we are. So the people that know their God shall be strong, but the people also that know their God will know themselves. Trust me. When you know who God is, then you know who you're supposed to be, because we are like him. We were made like him. And we've been looking at the different attributes of God, or the different things about God that really relates to us, that tells us who we are. And we have looked at some of the things already. As I said, I'm not going to go back. He is compassionate. He is powerful. He is mighty. And the last thing we did was that God is forgiving and he is merciful. He's gracious. He's forgiving. He's merciful. We looked at that. And we're not going to go back. But as we look at the fact that God is gracious, he's forgiving, and he's merciful, I want to start off by asking the question, what is the difference between grace, mercy, and forgiveness? Because those are the three things. He's gracious, he's forgiving, and he's merciful. What is the difference between being gracious, being merciful, and being forgiven? Are they the same thing, or are they different? Because if that's the way God is, then that's how we are supposed to be. We are supposed to be gracious, we are supposed to be merciful, and we are supposed to be forgiving, because we are like God. And if we're not behaving that way, if we don't have those attributes, it says something. Because God made us like that. Now, to be gracious, when you say someone is gracious, they're courteous, they're kind, they're pleasant, especially to someone of a lower social status or status, whichever way you choose to pronounce the word. When you're gracious to somebody, in Hebrew, grace means to bend or to stoop in kindness. In Hebrew. In Greek, the Greek word for grace is charis. And that's where we get our English word charity. It means a gift, favor, gratitude. So that's what grace is. That's what being gracious is. It's a gift, giving someone a gift. Someone who probably doesn't deserve it. Someone of a lower status. Someone who you would not normally look to give, but you show kindness to that person. You're really giving them grace. So grace includes kindness and compassion. It also gives the idea of giving a gift to someone, or doing a favor for someone, extending a blessing to someone who's unworthy. Are we like that? We're asking ourselves who we are. Who am I? Am I gracious? You know, every day we tell you, find someone to be a blessing to, someone who could not do anything for you. We always say that. We tell you that every day. It means extend grace to them. Do them a favor. They may not deserve it, but do a favor to them. That's being gracious. And when we're talking about God's grace is what we call unmerited favor, undeserved favor. That's God's grace. So being gracious is mean to show favor to somebody that they don't deserve. Mercy, on the other hand, has to do, and some of these things we've done already, and let me just say, what we are doing tonight, we've been down this road before, but I suspect we're going to keep coming back to this ever so often because it is so important. Mercy has to do with deliverance from judgment. Someone does something, and instead of them being punished, you say, listen, no punishment for you. Especially if you have the right or the authority to punish them. So you say, okay, I will not punish you. I will let you go free. That is what mercy is. The word mercy really is a Latin word which means price paid. The price has been paid for you. So you no longer have to pay that price. So grace is extending a favor. Mercy is saying, listen, you do not have to pay for this thing. The price has been paid, either by someone else or by me or whatever it is, but you got to go free. That's what mercy is. Forgiveness. So we're talking about being gracious, being merciful, and being forgiven. Forgiveness is a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards somebody who has harmed you. That's what forgiveness is. It's a conscious, deliberate decision to release those feelings of anger and vengeance and resentment towards someone who has harmed you, regardless of whether they deserve your forgiveness or not. Now, the root word forgive is from a Latin word, which means to give completely without reservation. Completely without reservation. It's a Latin word called perdonare. And the English version of that is pardon. So to forgive really is to excuse or to pardon someone in spite of what they did to you. So gracious means extending, being gracious, or grace is extending a favor to someone that they don't deserve. Mercy is saying, listen, the price has been paid. You don't have to be punished. And forgiveness says, I'm going to release this way I feel about you. You did me wrong. You did me wrong. But I am going to release that. Those three things. So understand the difference between these three. So I want to ask a question, and I want you to answer. And I think I asked this question to last time, but I'm going to ask it again. Can there be mercy without forgiveness? Can someone be shown mercy without being forgiven? I think Joshua answered the last time. I'm not too sure. But anyone, can someone be shown mercy without them being forgiven? And you all will tell me if anybody put up any hand, because I'm not able to see that. I'm just looking at the camera. Anybody? Is it possible to be merciful to someone without forgiving them? Nobody?
No hands yet, Dr. Just now.
I'll give you 30 more seconds.
Yes,
Think
Professor.
about it.
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor.
Yes. Okay, I want you all to put
Yes.
up your hand and so they will acknowledge you, right? But go ahead.
As I'm saying.
Brother Mitchell?
Yes, it is possible.
How is that possible? Tell me.
Well, depending on the point of time, you say that you have an incident, right? And you cross-thread or something, right? Like you had a little fight or whatever. I could be forgiven. I could forgive you. I could be merciful unto you without, forgiving you because it's the right thing to do. I don't want to be that stubborn. That I had a mindset now about that. I'm not forgiving or anything. So, but I could be merciful and then still forgive you after too. I show mercy first and still be forgiven because of the situation, because you love human being. You consider it, you consider the person and think human life. So, you show the mercy, you're merciful unto them because if you didn't forgive them, let me say, I just say, forgiving, right? You have to forgive them first. I might forgive you and yet still are not merciful to you. I might forgive you, but I'm merciful to you. I forgive you and I still do beating you up forever. But I can show mercy and forgive you too still. Be forgiven.
Right. So the question is, can you be merciful? Can you show somebody mercy, but you ain't forgive them? That's the question I'm asking. You ain't forgive them, you're still holding them in your heart. You're holding them in your heart. How can you show mercy to somebody that you're still holding in your heart? You're vexed. Usually when you don't forgive somebody, you want the worst to happen to them. How could you show mercy to somebody that you didn't forgive?
By having self-control. I'll be a person with self-control, knowing God and having that, that peace, that harmony within you. You have that kind of peace and understanding that you not put the anger and this kind of thing, you hurry to anger. You're thinking that situation through.
All right.
In that way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Anyone else?
Dr. Richard, yes, we have Joshua Richard's hand up, but in the chat, we have Jillian. She said no. Her answer to your question is no.
No.
Joshua Richard? Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Richards. I say that you can have mercy without forgiveness. Because if somebody steals money from you, you can choose to have mercy on them by saying that you don't have to give me back the money that you stole, but you don't necessarily have to forgive them. Meaning that you're still angry with them for stealing their money, but you told them, you had mercy and you told them you don't have to give it back. Or in the opposite situation, somebody's the same person steal money from you, but you could choose to say, well, I forgive you, I'm not holding this in my heart, but you have to give me back my money. Like, I'm not angry about it, all right, but what you did was wrong. I'm not angry about it, but you still have to pay me back. So that way you have forgiveness, but you don't have mercy. So you can't have the two.
Well, okay. All right. I don't want you to go there. I wanted to find out first if you can have mercy without forgiveness. I'll come to the second part of it. All right.
I say yes, you can have mercy without forgiveness.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, Dr. Richard. Bernadette says it goes hand in hand. And we have Elder Gail.
Initially I was saying they go hand in hand, but I was just musing on what you asked. And yes, you can have mercy without forgiveness, because I've seen situations where you may have done something wrong to someone and that really hurt the person. And they may come to a point where they feel, you know, I'm really hurt about it. But there may be a situation where you need my assistance. I'm just using, I'm not saying it's me, right? But I'm just looking at the scenario where you need my assistance. I will still do something good for you. Now remember, mercy is undeserved favor. So it means you don't deserve my favor, but I will still extend my favor to you. But it doesn't mean that what you did to me, I've forgiven you for it.
All right. But let me just say this. Grace is undeserved favor. Eh? We talk about mercy. When we say mercy, we're saying we're writing off the debt.
I apologize.
Yeah. We talk about mercy. We're saying with mercy, you're saying, listen, you don't have to pay for this thing. You could go free. All right. Whatever you did to me, bam. Not whole, you know, you don't have to pay. You can go free. But I forgive you. Is that possible? That's what I'm asking.
Dr. Richards, we have Yane hand is up, and Kimlan. Yane?
Hi, good night, everyone.
Hi.
I'm thinking of it from like a personal perspective. Like as an individual, as a human being, we are very complex. So it's very possible if you are generally a compassionate person and someone does something wrong to you, it will have that like your heart feeling away and not wanting to do something negative to them because you're studying. I might study why you do that. I feel bad because generally like I care about people, right? But you could still harbor that resentment and be upset about what was done to you, while at the same time, oh gosh, like, you know, people, and that's a very human thing, to be in a position where you feel both of those things at the same time.
Okay. So are you saying then that you can be merciful? Because I understand what you're saying, but I want to be clear as to if you're answering the question. Because can there be mercy without forgiveness? Can you say, listen, I'm letting this person go. They don't have to pay for what they did for me, but I ain't forgive them. Is that possible?
Yes, because I still very much feel all of the things that I felt when the thing was done to me. But when I think of you and the idea of harming you, it's like my heart can't let me do that too. So I will end up exercising mercy because I can't be that kind of person to you.
But you could hold them in your heart.
Yeah, you can. But you still would be merciful towards them and not make them pay for what they have done. So you would still have to be intentional about taking that next step to, yes, I'm not being that way towards you. Yes, I'm not harming you or making you pay, but I have to take care of what's going on in my heart now.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Dr. Richards. We have Sister Kimlan.
Good night, everyone. Professor, I remember last week you were talking about mercy being something based on obligation, and you referred to with Pontius Pilate freeing Barabbas. So it was done. So he had to give mercy unto it based on the obligation and the role that he filled. So he had no emotional attachment to forgive or not to forgive Barabbas because he was a prisoner. Secondly, we would get bestowed mercy in situations of like traffic tickets and stuff or court judgments. It doesn't require forgiveness in those aspects because you're dealing with a scenario based on fact and it's not emotional. And in a personal standpoint, you know that statement, I forgive you, but I ain't forget. I believe that is a form of mercy without forgiveness because you can't forgive somebody and still remember. If you forgive, it means you release. So when people say, I forgive you, no, but I ain't forget, that's basically saying, I'm showing you mercy and I'm releasing myself from the wrath of what you've done and I'm letting you go free. But I have not forgiven you because if I've forgiven you, then I've forgiven you. So you can show mercy. And there's another instance where sometimes you could show the mercy without forgiving because based on the scenario of how the pain may be inflicted, you'll be cautious. You know, so you keep the peace, but you'll be cautious based on the scenario. So you may not extend the forgiveness, but you'll also extend mercy in terms of holding peace. But you'll be cautious, so you'll still be partially unforgiven.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Dr. Richards, no, I don't have any hands, but Marissa says, yes, it is possible. But once the person does not constantly repeat what they had done.
Okay. Thank you. So the answer is yes. There can be mercy without forgiveness. All right. And there are instances, as Kimlan quoted, and I think I shared that last week. Sometimes, you know, something happened publicly, and you remember, mercy is an act. Mercy doesn't require really emotional attachment. There could be reasons why you show mercy, as in the case of Pilate. All right. Pilate was duty bound to release somebody, so he showed mercy because the people wanted it. In instances where it will benefit me, and we look at politicians, sometimes they lobby for somebody to be let go, to have mercy. You know, let's have mercy on them because it benefits them. They don't forgive the person, but it benefits their political position. And so they say, you know, they lobby for mercy for the person. So you could have mercy without forgiveness. In instances where it makes you look like a hero, something happened publicly, and because, you know, people looking at you on the cameras are there on Facebook and everybody, you know, you say, oh no, that's good, you know, that's all right, you know, you leave it, but you're still holding resentment, you're vexed at it, whatever it is, you are angry, but in the eyes of the public, because of how you want to look, you want to come across as a hero, you show them mercy because mercy is an act. In most instances, showing mercy is an act. And when I say an act, it's something that you do. So you can say, let the person go, don't do anything, but you're still harboring resentment. And sometimes too, if you put under pressure, for example, there are some people who are on death row, and Amnesty International is lobbying for those people to be set free. Well, not necessarily set free, but not executed. And because of the position that you're in and the political pressure or whatever public pressure, you say, listen, I'm going to have mercy on this person. But the unforgiveness is still there. So yes, it is possible to be merciful without being forgiven. But let me ask you the flip side that Joshua started to answer. Can there be forgiveness without mercy? Can you forgive somebody and still say you had to pay for that? Can there be forgiveness without mercy? Answer. Question to be answered. Can there be forgiveness without mercy?
Sister Kimlan, your hand is up.
I'd like to say this without sounding, how to put it, heretic, but when you read the Old Testament, God forgave many times, but they still had to pay for what they did, even though he was merciful. But many instances going through the children of Israel, especially with all the millions of warnings, and they still did not take heed. And he gave the signs and they still misbehaved. You know, he forgave, he spared, but the wrath was still felt. So mercy wasn't spared to them. So yeah, well, at least from my understanding of what I've been reading. So I would say yes.
Why do you think that would sound heretical? It doesn't?
I don't know, because I mean, you know, we have people who still, you know, feeding on milk and not strong food yet. So just not to confuse anybody's thought process in case. So that's why I'd have to disclaim it just in case.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. So let me just.
Dr. Richards, no, we have Yanni. Yanni, your hand is up.
Yes, Yanni.
I have a question more than a contribution. What is the difference between, it kind of goes along with what Sister Kimlan said, what is the difference between having a need to be merciful and like natural consequences of people's actions?
What is the difference between having a
Is it,
need to be
is
merciful?
you, yeah, like I try to draw the line in my mind between being merciful, which is not feeling the need to like this kind of payback energy, but at the same time, actions have consequences, and at times there will be times where humans have to face the consequences of their actions.
Mhm.
So in that
And
sense,
mhm.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead. I'm listening, I'm listening.
And that is exactly right. Just as Kimlan shared, there are consequences to action. And I think very often we as believers feel that God is merciful. So if I do this, nothing will happen. He'll forgive me. And yeah, he will forgive you once you genuinely repent. But your actions have consequences. That's why a lot of people end up pregnant. A lot of people end up with STDs and AIDS. A lot of people end up, being hurt and maimed because of their actions. It doesn't mean that God will not forgive you if you do something wrong. But we need to understand that we do things sometimes expecting God to forgive us, and he does. But we need to understand that because of what we did, this may cause a chain of events, as in the case of David in the Old Testament. God forgave David. David wrote a whole, remember we went to Psalm 51, and God did forgive him. And God said, this is a man after my own heart. But the child died, and his sons died. 3 of them, they got killed. And God pronounced judgment. So forgiveness does not mitigate judgment. It does not stop judgment. And remember, mercy is withholding judgment. Mercy is saying, listen, your price has been paid, so you don't have to do anything. Nothing's going to happen to you. And that can happen. But we need to understand that there are times when there's forgiveness, God will forgive us for the worst thing that we do. But we still have to stand the consequences. There are many people in jail now who have repented. They've committed crime, murder even, and they have repented. Does it mean that they get out of jail free? No. There's no mercy. They still have to pay for the action, but there's forgiveness. There is forgiveness. So that it is not held against them anymore, as far as God is concerned. But the consequences of the action they must suffer. So let me ask you another question. And I'm not sure if I asked this before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you forgive someone for something that they did to someone else? Is it possible to forgive someone for something they did to somebody else? It's not you. Can you forgive someone for something that they did to someone else? They did not do it to you personally, but they did it to someone else. Is it possible for you to forgive somebody like that? Anybody?
Dr. Richard, we have Sister Yanez.
Yes, Sister Yane?
I would say yes, just based on the fact that, again, human beings are complex creatures. And like, for example, if you have a situation where like a child grew up in an abusive household and they witness certain things being done to a parent, they would grow up with in a lot of instances, trauma, unresolved pain, having to do, and resentment, and all those things having to do with one parent, seeing one parent harm the other, harboring resentment about that. And I think in that instance, the healing looks like forgiving that parent who didn't necessarily do anything directly to you, but you witnessed things that had an impact on you that resulted in resentment.
Okay. I'll come back to you on that. Anyone else? No?
Yes, Dr. No, Dr. Richards, we have Elder Gail. Her hand is up.
Okay.
Yes, you can forgive someone who has done something to someone else. And simply because there has been no emotional attachment for you. And I'll give you an example. This is a very real one. My brother-in-law was unfaithful to my sister. They never brought, of course. And but I always saw him as my favorite brother-in-law because he was always very nice to me. So even though that situation happened, I was, yes, disappointed, but I forgave him, but my sister hasn't. Because of the emotional attachment she had in this situation, it's different for me because I'm like an outsider, remembering the good things about him. And of course, I'm down the road, you forgive him, but she has not. So as long as there is no emotional attachment in that situation, I believe, yes, you can do so.
Okay. Anyone else?
No, Dr. Richards.
Okay. Well, I have a different perspective on it. So let me just say why. If the person didn't do anything to you, then why are you forgiving them? What are you forgiving them for? Now, when I ask the question, can you forgive someone for something they did to someone else? You may think, well, okay, I was not directly involved, so they didn't do anything to me. But the fact that you have, as you know, Ella Gale was talking about emotional attachment, once it affected you in any way negatively, they may not have had to do it directly to you. But as in the case of Sister Yanni, there's some sort of trauma coming out of whatever action it is. It affected you. It may not have been done to you directly, but it affected you. And once it affected you negatively, then you can say, I need to forgive this person. Forgiveness has to be something personal. I can't forgive Putin for invading Ukraine. That's not for me. He didn't do anything to me personally unless it has affected me in some way. Maybe when I'm looking at the images and I see, you know, what has happened, and I may need to release him because of that. But affecting does not just mean physically. So you may not have gotten the abuse and the licks, but you witness it, and that affected you, and you need to release the person, you need to release them. So once it affected you negatively, then you can forgive them. But if it hasn't affected you at all, then what is the need to forgive? Remember, the Bible talks about forgiving one another. And the scripture always talks about if somebody offended you, if there's an offense, if something happened that affected you, then you need to forgive. So in order for you to forgive somebody, and this is my perspective, it must have affected you in some way negatively. It must have affected you. So again, if you forgive him, then it had to have affected you. You can't forgive somebody for something that didn't affect you. It may have affected you in the sense that that was your favorite brother-in-law, you said, and he let you down. Or for what he did to your sister. Maybe psychologically it affected you and you had to release that. But if there's no connection at all between you and somebody, then you can't forgive them because there's no offense there. I can't go and say, well, I forgive everybody who in prison. They committed a crime and they need to be forgiven by the people that they affected and by God. So again, my perspective, and you don't have to agree with me on this one. Can you forgive somebody for something they did to someone else? I say no. Unless what they did to someone else connected with you, affected you in some way. I pause here. Feel free to disagree. Okay. So I want to read just one, I want to do just one other thing.
Dr. Richards, Elder Gail, hand
Yes.
is up.
Yes, Elder Gail.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree with you totally. The part just now where you said, unless that has caused hurt to someone, and the reason I said that is because he hurt my sister. Remember, that's my sister whom I love dearly. So I was able to forgive him. And you see, one of the things that came to my spirit was when that situation arose, was that who am I to say I'm not forgiving him? I have done so many wrong things and God has forgiven me. So even though he did that to my sister, it was a hurtful thing for her. And he was someone who as I said, I loved dearly, and he disappointed me. But I could not forgive him for what he did.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that was my reasoning.
And that's what I'm saying. It had to have affected you in some way for you to be able to forgive him. If that didn't affect you at all, then there's no need for forgiveness, because he would not have done anything wrong to you. And this is one of the things that we need to understand, that sometimes, and I think Brother Sheldon said it some time ago, your sin affects me. So sometimes you do something wrong, and you may not have done it to me, but it affects me, and I need to release you. I need to forgive you for what you did to me. And if I don't do that, and one of the things we're going to see as we move on is forgiveness is for me. It's for me. So I need to release you. I need to forgive you for what you have done to me. Yes, I think we're going to have to stop here tonight. I was going to move on to something else, but we're going to continue tomorrow, God's willing, because I want to do something. We have something to do right now, but I want us to remember that. And you see this thing called forgiveness, as I said, we've been here before, and we probably going to come back here again sometime, because it's something that is so important for us as believers that so many of us have a challenge with. All of us have a challenge with releasing, because our human nature is to hit back. Our human nature is to get even. Our human nature is to see people suffer the way we suffered because it affected us. That's our human nature, the fallen nature. But it's important, because there was a man that lived some time ago. They beat him, they pull out his beard, they beat him beyond recognition. And he was able to say, Father, forgive them. And if he said, Father, forgive them, it meant that he would have forgiven them. We are like God, and we should be able to forgive. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about it again to see if we could come to that place where it will help us to be able to forgive. Yeah, so we end here this session for this evening.
Dr.
God
Richards,
bless you.
Dr. Should we have a comment in the chat? Sister Jolene said yes. Someone might harm someone close to you, and you feel the hurt or bitterness as if it was done to you. So
Correct.
forgiveness has to come into play.
Yes, indeed. It must affect you in some way for you to be able to forgive. Okay, so I have to stop here, because tonight I want to, and Joshua, we can come off of YouTube. I'm going to say bye-bye to all the folks on YouTube right now. God bless you. We will continue tomorrow at 8 p.m. The Zoom is open, and well, the Zoom is open at 7, but those of us on YouTube will start at 8 p.m.